In the depths of the Cold War, when the world lived under the constant shadow of nuclear confrontation, a new kind of warship began to patrol the oceans in near silence. These vessels were not designed for glory or headlines, but for deterrence, secrecy, and survival. Among them was a submarine whose name carried the weight of American history and resolve, USS Theodore Roosevelt, hull number SSBN-600. She was not merely a machine of steel and nuclear power, but a moving symbol of balance in a world where a single miscalculation could end civilization. USS Theodore Roosevelt was one of the George Washington-class ballistic missile submarines, the very first generation of nuclear-powered submarines designed specifically to carry ballistic missiles. This class marked a revolutionary change in naval warfare. Before them, deterrence relied heavily on land-based missiles and bomber aircraft, both vulnerable to surprise attack. Submarines like Theodore Roosevelt changed everything. Hidden beneath the ocean, they offered a survivable second strike capability, ensuring that no enemy could attack the United States without facing devastating retaliation. Construction of USS Theodore Roosevelt began at the Electric Boat Division of General Dynamics in Groton, Connecticut, a shipyard that would become legendary for building America's nuclear submarine fleet. She was laid down in the late 1950s, a time when nuclear technology was advancing at breathtaking speed. Engineers, designers, and sailors were venturing into largely uncharted territory, combining nuclear propulsion with long-range ballistic missiles for the first time in history. When Theodore Roosevelt was launched, she represented the cutting edge of military technology. Her nuclear reactor allowed her to remain submerged for months at a time, limited not by fuel but by food and human endurance. This capability gave her an almost ghost-like presence. She could disappear beneath the waves, travel thousands of miles without detection, and wait silently for orders that everyone hoped would never come. The submarine was named after Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States, a man known for his belief in strength, preparedness, and the famous phrase, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." No name could have been more fitting. USS Theodore Roosevelt embodied that philosophy perfectly. She spoke softly by remaining hidden and silent, but carried a big stick in the form of nuclear-armed ballistic missiles capable of reaching targets across continents. At the heart of USS Theodore Roosevelt's mission was the Polaris missile system. These missiles were housed in vertical launch tubes behind the sail, a distinctive feature that set ballistic missile submarines apart from attack submarines. The Polaris missile was a marvel of its time, capable of being launched while the submarine was submerged. This meant the boat did not need to surface, reducing vulnerability and increasing survivability. Life aboard USS Theodore Roosevelt was demanding and intense. The crew lived in close quarters, surrounded by machinery, electronics, and the ever-present hum of the nuclear reactor. Privacy was almost non-existent. Sailors worked long shifts, often in artificial lighting, with no sense of day or night. Despite the hardships, morale and professionalism remained high. Every crew member understood the gravity of their mission. They were not just sailors, they were guardians of deterrence. The submarine operated with two complete crews, commonly referred to as the Blue Crew and the Gold Crew. This system allowed USS Theodore Roosevelt to spend more time at sea, maximizing her deterrent value. While one crew was on patrol, the other trained, rested, and prepared to take over. This rotation ensured the submarine could maintain a near-constant presence in strategic patrol areas around the globe. Patrols were conducted in near-total secrecy. Even today, many details about the routes, patrol areas, and specific missions of USS Theodore Roosevelt remain classified or deliberately vague. What is known is that she spent countless days and nights beneath the ocean, listening, waiting, and standing ready. The crew trained constantly, running drills for every conceivable scenario, from missile launch procedures to reactor emergencies. During the height of the Cold War, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union reached levels that brought the world frighteningly close to nuclear war. Events like the Cuban Missile Crisis underscored just how critical submarines like USS Theodore Roosevelt were to maintaining strategic stability. While politicians negotiated and diplomats argued, ballistic missile submarines silently ensured that no side could gain an advantage through surprise attack. USS Theodore Roosevelt was not intended to fight battles in the traditional sense. She was never meant to fire her missiles in anger. Her true success lay in the fact that she never had to. By existing, by patrolling, and by remaining undetected, she helped prevent war rather than wage it. This paradox is at the core of nuclear deterrence, and Theodore Roosevelt was a perfect embodiment of it. Technologically, the submarine was a stepping stone to future generations of ballistic missile submarines. Lessons learned from her operations influenced the design of later classes, including improvements in stealth, missile accuracy, crew comfort, and reactor safety. Every patrol added to the collective knowledge that would shape the U.S. Navy's undersea deterrent for decades to come. As years passed and technology advanced, newer submarines with more capable missile systems began to enter service. The Polaris missiles were eventually replaced by more advanced systems on newer boats, and the early George Washington-class submarines gradually became less central to the nation's strategic deterrent. USS Theodore Roosevelt continued to serve faithfully, adapting to changes and maintaining readiness as long as she was called upon. Eventually, the time came for USS Theodore Roosevelt to be retired from active service. Decommissioning a nuclear submarine is a complex and carefully controlled process. The reactor must be shut down, nuclear fuel removed, and the vessel prepared for disposal or recycling. Though her days of silent patrols came to an end, her legacy remained firmly intact. Today, USS Theodore Roosevelt is remembered as part of the pioneering generation that transformed naval warfare and strategic deterrence. She was among the first submarines to prove that nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines were not just viable, but indispensable. Her service helped establish a balance of power that, despite its terrifying potential, kept the Cold War from turning into a full-scale nuclear conflict. The story of USS Theodore Roosevelt is not one of dramatic battles or heroic last stands. It is a quieter story, one defined by discipline, patience, and restraint. It is the story of sailors who stood watch in silence, knowing that their mission was to prevent the unthinkable. It is the story of technology used not for conquest, but for deterrence and stability. In many ways, the greatest achievement of USS Theodore Roosevelt was invisibility. She sailed unseen, unheard, and largely unknown to the public she protected. That anonymity was her strength. While aircraft carriers projected power openly and visibly, Theodore Roosevelt represented power held in reserve, ready but restrained. Her name continues to resonate because it connects two eras of American strength, one led by a president who believed in preparedness, and another defined by submarines that embodied that belief beneath the waves. USS Theodore Roosevelt served without fanfare, without headlines, and without public recognition, yet her contribution to global security was profound. Even decades after her decommissioning, the principles she represented remain central to modern naval strategy. Today's ballistic missile submarines are larger, quieter, and more advanced, but they follow the same fundamental mission pioneered by boats like Theodore Roosevelt. Silent patrols, continuous readiness, and absolute reliability remain the cornerstones of undersea deterrence. In remembering USS Theodore Roosevelt SSBN-600, we are reminded that history is not only shaped by visible events and famous moments, but also by long stretches of vigilance carried out far from public view. Beneath the ocean's surface, in the cold and darkness, sailors once stood guard aboard a submarine that helped keep the world from tearing itself apart. Her steel hull may no longer cut through the deep, and her missiles may never have flown, but USS Theodore Roosevelt fulfilled her purpose completely. She stood watch so that others could sleep in peace. She carried immense power so that it would never need to be used. And in doing so, she earned her place as a silent guardian of one of the most dangerous eras in human history.